We've got some breaking news on the parking lot lawyer extraordinaire front. Yes, I am talking about Alina Habba, one of convicted felon Donald Trump's favorite law lackeys, someone who has a track record that sucks. As you know, there are some criminal defendants in the state of New Jersey that moved to dismiss their federal indictments because of the fact that Alina Habba was invalidly and illegally appointed the United States attorney for the federal court system in New Jersey. The Trump administration trying to outmaneuver the law, failing miserably. A district court judge said to those criminal defendants, sorry, not going to dismiss your indictments, but yes, I will grant your motions to disqualify Alina Habba. She and the Trump administration appealing that decision. And today, right now, a trio of judges on an appeals court that actually shares its space with Emil Bovee, another convicted felon Donald Trump law lackey, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. This trio of judges on the Third Circuit telling Alina Habba, no dice, hard pass, you cannot pass go. Alina Habba's disqualification being upheld and affirmed by this Third Circuit Court of Appeals. It is a 32-page order. I have it here. Let's start at the end with the wham slammer of a ruling. And I'm going to read it verbatim because it hits all the high points, none of the low, because they don't exist. Here we go. And this is Roman numeral 4, page 32. Habba is not the acting U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey by virtue of her appointment as first assistant U.S. attorney, because only the first assistant who is in place at the time the vacancy arises automatically assumes the functions and duties of the office under the FVRA, that's the Federal Vacancies Act. Additionally, because Habba was nominated for the vacant U.S. attorney position, the FVRA's nomination bar prevents her from assuming the role of acting U.S. attorney. Finally, the Attorney General's delegation of all the powers of a U.S. attorney to Habba is prohibited by the FVRA's exclusivity provision. Therefore, we will affirm the district court's disqualification order. That's verbatim, people. Page 32. Let's get into the meat on the bone so you can understand why this panel of appellate court judges ruled the way it did. It's very common sense, very logical. We're going to walk through it quickly together so that you can be armed with the knowledge to be able to tell people who think that this is some, partisan hackery from yet another federal appeals court. You can tell them, nope, you're wrong. And Katie Phang told me why you're wrong. Let's rock and roll. Again, United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit that covers a place like New Jersey entered today, December 1st, 2025. It involves two pending federal criminal cases. One involves two defendants, Julian Gerard Jr. and Julian Gerard III. The second case is a guy by the name of Cesar Humberto Pina, and they basically were consolidated for purposes of these issues of dismissal of indictments as well as the disqualification of Habba. And so that's why these cases were argued together in front of the Third Circuit panel of judges. Let's talk about those judges. Oral arguments took place on October 20th of 2025 in front of Judges Restrepo, Smith, and Fisher. Again, it's a trio of judges, and before those of you that are MAGA-minded think that this was, again, a group of activist judges, let me remind you, Judge Restrepo, yes, an Obama appointee, smart judge, and then you also have Judges Smith and Fisher, both of whom were nominated by George W. Bush. That was a Republican president, if those MAGA minds need to be reminded. So those three judges unanimously, all three in agreement that Habba's disqualification must be upheld and affirmed. Let's get into the details. Shout out to David Kolansky, Abby Lowell at Lowell & Associates, good friends and coalition partners with DDF, Democracy Defenders Fund. Abby Lowell did a lot of the arguments here and did a spectacular job. Alrighty. The opinion of the court, Judge Fisher, again, nominated by George W. Bush, may I remind you, entered this opinion. And again, all three agreed. But here we go. The U.S. Attorney's offices are some of the most critical agencies in the federal government. They play an important role in the criminal and civil justice systems and are vital in keeping our communities safe. The U.S. Attorney leading each office is an officer whose appointment requires Senate confirmation. Where a vacancy exists, Congress has shown a strong preference to have an acting officer be someone with a breadth of experience to properly lead the office. It's apparent that the current administration has been frustrated by some of the legal and political barriers to getting its appointees in place. It's true, right? It's been frustrated. So instead of doing the lawful, legal, valid way, the Trump administration thought that they would play fast and loose with the rules and the laws and try to install somebody like Alina Habba, a yes woman to what Donald Trump wants, and the federal judges have all collectively now said no. The defendants in those two criminal cases I just read out to you moved to dismiss their indictments and to disqualify Habba from participating in their prosecutions, arguing that she is unlawfully serving as the acting U.S. attorney. The district court denied the motions to dismiss, but granted the motions to disqualify Habba from those prosecutions. The government appeals. We will affirm. Now, here is the deal. And I really want you to understand a little bit in detail why this ruling is so important. Let's just take a pause for a second, because the same arguments have been raised concerning who else? Lindsay Halligan. Lindsay Halligan, who has been, up until last week, dealing with the prosecutions of Letitia James as well as James Comey. And as you'll recall, just last week, she was disqualified as the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia on similar grounds, right? And so those prosecutions have poof, actually gone away at this point. And so this is an incredible ruling for an appeals court that is unlikely going to be hearing the appeals concerning Tish James and James Comey. This is a great roadmap for that appeals court to be able to look at and say, well, gosh, my brothers on another appeals court have actually upheld the disqualification of Alina Habba for violating the FVRA. Gosh, if Lindsay Halligan's appointment also violates the FVRA, then we're in good stead. And the law is solid on this, people. Yes, is there a possibility of an appeal to the Supreme Court? Of course. Will the Supreme Court take it? I don't think so. I don't think so. But crazier shit has happened with this particular SCOTUS. So let's get into this. Here we go. Now, as we talked about, the FVRA, the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, and we're going to call it the FVRA for the entirety of this episode. The FVRA is the federal statute that dictates how you fill vacancies that arise, and it's very explicit in its language. And in this instance, the FVRA limits who can fill those roles, those vacancies, right? And it says a person may not serve as an acting officer for an office under this section if during the 365-day period preceding that vacancy, that person was either never the first assistant or was the first assistant for fewer than 90 days. Let's take a second here. Just makes sense, right? If you haven't served as the first assistant U.S. attorney for that office for at least during a year preceding the vacancy of the U.S. attorney's position, and you're the first assistant, but you've done it for less than 90 days, you want somebody with the skill experience to be able to run multi-person staffed offices and to handle some of the most serious freaking cases that come across an attorney's desk. Clearly, that lack of experience and that lack of management control and skill is apparent with people like Halligan, with all of the errors that she committed with the grand jury for the James Comey case, right? And all of the other errors that she's committed, but now clearly with the Habba appointment. Another disqualifier under the FVRA is if the president has submitted a nomination of that person to the Senate for appointment to that office. So there's very clear language under the FVRA as to why somebody like Alina Habba is not qualified under the FVRA to be able to fill that position of acting U.S. attorney. Finally, service as an acting officer is time limited. The person serving as an acting officer may serve in the office for no longer than 210 days beginning on the date the vacancy occurs. The 210-day clock is tolled during the time a nomination for the vacant office is pending before the United States Senate. A rejection or withdrawal of that nomination triggers a new 210-day clock for acting service under the FVRA, again subject to tolling during the pendency of a second nomination. Very clear language, right? We're all following along. So what happened specifically in this case? I'm going to refresh all of y'all's recollection. So the Attorney General, Pamela Jo, appoints Alina Habba as the interim U.S. Attorney, and she's sworn in on March 28th of 2025. On June 30th, Trump nominates Habba for the permanent role of U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey, but the United States Senate never acted on Habba's nomination. Why? Well, it's fairly obvious. They didn't think Habba would be able to do the job well. And listen, thank you, U.S. Senate, for actually doing the right freaking thing, because that's totally accurate. So, as the 120-day deadline approached on the interim U.S. Attorney role for Habba, the District Court for the District of New Jersey issued an order that said that the then first Assistant U.S. Attorney, Desiree Grace, she would end up being the interim U.S. Attorney once Habba's 120 days expires. Makes sense, right? Desiree Grace, as I've covered here on this channel, well-respected, career prosecutor, a Republican, okay? Somebody that is non-controversial for purposes of the enforcement of the laws in the state of New Jersey. The district court judges say, we want Desiree Grace, the then first Assistant U.S. Attorney at the time. What happens? The Department of Justice, led by Pamela Jo Bondi, fires Desiree Grace. You want to talk about vindictive termination of employment. In response, then, what does the Trump administration do? Well, on July 24th of this year, it took several steps. Trump withdraws Habba's nomination for U.S. Attorney. Habba resigns as the interim U.S. Attorney. Pamela Jo enters an order appointing Habba as a, quote, special attorney to the Attorney General, stating that Habba can now do, quote, any kind of legal proceedings which a U.S. Attorney is authorized to conduct. And in that same order, Pamela Jo purports to then mean that Habba becomes the acting U.S. Attorney, because Habba is the now first Assistant U.S. Attorney, and there's a vacancy, and that's why Habba can then be the acting U.S. Attorney. All of that machinations just so the Trump administration can get Habba in a position of power in the District of New Jersey. So, Julian Gerard Jr. had a pending criminal trial for drug trafficking and firearm charges. So he filed a motion to dismiss the indictment, stating that Habba's appointment was unlawful. His co-defendant, Julian Gerard III, also indicted on the same charges, joined the motion that next day. The district court then end up having a judge in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, Judge Matthew Brann, B-R-A-N-N, the chief judge of the United States District Court there in the Middle District, to handle all of these issues concerning Habba. The district court judge ruled on August 1st that the Gerards were not entitled to a dismissal of their indictments, but deferred ruling on their motion to disqualify because he wanted to have further briefing. Now, another criminal defendant by the name of Cesar Pina filed a motion to dismiss. He was facing wire fraud, money laundering, and bribery charges, raised many of the same arguments as the Gerards did. Pina's case was reassigned to Judge Brann. They did one oral argument, as we know, in October. The district court then grants the motion to disqualify Habba for those cases, for the Gerards and for Cesar Pina. And then the district court said, I'm going to stay my order disqualifying Habba pending a decision by this appeals court, which is the Third Circuit. And that's how we got here. That's the short of it. Now, very quickly, the bottom line is this. The court says that the FVRA, in the strictest of readings, does not allow for what the Trump administration tried to do. It says very clearly that you cannot say that Habba can be a special attorney and have all the powers of a U.S. attorney. Habba was nominated by Trump. Even if you withdraw it, the opinion makes it clear just because you withdraw the nomination, Donald Trump, that doesn't mean that she wasn't nominated, right? And because she was nominated, that is a disqualifier. In fact, the language is clear. There is a time after the president submits a nomination. There is a time before. Just because the president later may withdraw the nomination does not erase the fact that he submitted it. Here, the president undisputedly took the statutory action of submitting a nomination when he nominated Habba for U.S. attorney. The FVRA includes no additional language to indicate that her nomination must be pending, for the prohibition for her to serve continues to apply, right? Furthermore, you can't just say that the acting U.S. attorney designation for Habba allows her to do all prosecutorial and supervisory authorities because the attorney general says she can. It's not just I tell you that she can do it and it happens. There are laws and rules in place explicitly for the reason that we just discussed. In the end, this appeals court is saying it's not going to fly. Habba is not the validly appointed U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey. Everything that the Trump administration has done to try to get her into place violates the Federal Vacancies Reforms Act. Because of that, Habba cannot serve as the U.S. attorney. Now, the reason why I wanted you guys to know the charges that the Gerards and Cesar Pina are facing is because, and listen, this is not commentary on if they're guilty. They are entitled to go to trial and have a jury of their peers hear their arguments. No burden shifting, of course, but for a jury of their peers to determine whether the United States government has met its burden of proof in proving all the elements of the offenses that they're facing. The reason why I read those charges to you is the following. It just underscores how much this Trump administration has destroyed any concept of public safety. That federal cases cannot be prosecuted in the state of New Jersey because Alina Habba refuses to actually step away from this bullshit. And so when you have people facing drug trafficking, firearms, wire fraud, money laundering charges, these are serious offenses. When there is a very real possibility that invalid appointments results in dismissal, which in this instance didn't happen. But let's be clear, if nobody is prosecuting these cases as the U.S. attorney, there's a serious freaking problem. It just goes to show that Donald Trump doesn't care about anybody but himself. And all of the people that are surrounding him, like Pamela Joe, Todd Blanche, and others, that they also don't care about you or Americans. They only care about one client, and that's Donald Trump. The Senate confirmation process for somebody like Pamela Joe Bondi was a shit show. It was a disgrace. As the Attorney General of the United States, she has no business putting her thumb on the scale of trying to get people like Habba and Halligan appointed. And I'm grateful for the rule of law prevailing today in the Third Circuit, even though Emile Bove currently takes up oxygen and space in that bench. But I'm grateful because this is why we fight. This is why the amicus briefs are done. This is why organizations like DDF, with which I am proud to be affiliated and associated, that is the reason why we are actively doing the work that we are doing to make sure that things like Habba's invalid and illegal appointments, that they are not only challenged, but that they are shown support. Because this is how we get things done, people. It's a coalition of forces fighting the good fight every single day. Be mad, be outraged, demand accountability. I'm off to rattle some more cages. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.